on Wednesday? Assessment of ventilation, assessment of oxygenation, and pressure control. Those three areas. So today's lecture is not going to be on the exam. Okay? And then Wednesday we'll have the exam, and we're going to be in room 1203 downstairs for the exam. And the lab will be an open lab. And then you can practice on the vents, setting them up. Instructors will be here to help you guys out as you have questions, whatever you need. So we'll do that Wednesday. We'll have an open lab. Ian and I were setting up last Thursday. We are in the sim lab with our guys in the control room, and we're trying to set up our simulations for the competencies. So that's what we've been doing. So you need to practice working on setting up your BiPAP and setting up all the machines. So that's what you can do on Wednesday. All right, so we're given, and you know what? You can thank Dotto for that. It's your free lab time. Thank you, Dotto.
You're welcome.
Okay, so far, this ventilator boot camp, you guys are making it through. It's tough. We're more than halfway through this ventilator boot camp. Okay? So, what have you learned so far? Let's do a little recap on our modes of ventilation. So, for mandatory breaths, tell me the modes that you've learned for volume ventilation.
CPAP? No, CPAP.
For mandatory breath, not spontaneous. Mandatory breaths. So you learn volume assist control. Who can tell me about volume assist control? I want to know the trigger. I want to know the limit. I want to know the cycle. All right, Nathan?
Trigger is patient and time.
Okay.
Yeah, patient and time.
Okay.
Cycle is volume.
Talk loud so everybody can hear. Cycle is volume.
Cycle is volume.
What's your limit? What limits it?
Flow and flow and.
You guys set a pressure limit on the machine?
Yeah.
A peak pressure limit? If it reaches that limit, doesn't that limit that volume being delivered?
No.
So that's your limit, pressure. You set a peak pressure on that ventilator.
Yeah.
If you go above that
If
pressure,
you're above
it
that.
doesn't deliver the volume.
There you go.
So you pressure limited in volume ventilation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's cycled by volume. What does the pressure waveform look like?
Square. It's not really square.
It's going to be like all
Accelerating.
Accelerating.
We say
Good. Square. Who said that for T?
voice.
Flow is square. We learned
Flow
that
is
way.
square.
It's
Flow is
flow
square. What does square wave mean to you? What does that mean?
It's constant.
It means that it's a
It's
constant
the peak
flow.
and then constant.
It holds that flow throughout the breath. Okay? So that's volume AC. Who can explain what AC means?
Assist control.
Assist control, and what is it?
Give the patient attempt to take in breath. The whole side of the breath is given to the patient.
Okay, so it's a fully supported mode. Okay, the patient's not doing any work of breathing. What work of breathing is the patient doing in volume AC? What is the only work? The trigger. They're triggering. That's it. Okay, so that's their work of breathing. They have to trigger the machine on their spontaneous breaths. That's it. So if somebody comes in with cardiac issues, you'd want to give them a fully supported mode, right? You don't want them to do any work because you want their heart to rest. So you would pick that mode. You would pick an AC, a fully supported mode for somebody that needed it. Okay. What's the other volume ventilation that we do?
What's the only word?
SIM.
Volume SIMV. And explain SIMV to me. What does it stand for?
They are synchronized intermittent management.
All these questions, all the residents are going to ask you, what does this mean? And they're going to ask you in the fall. Because they don't know. They're really asking you. What does SIMV stand for? What does it mean? What's the difference between assist control and SIMV in volume ventilation? So what is the difference with SIMV?
Patient can get breath whatever he wants. Same time he is getting the mandatory breath?
So he has mandatory breaths and spontaneous breaths that could be possibly augmented by pressure support. So the spontaneous breaths could be augmented by pressure support, just to overcome the resistance of the tube, right? Okay, so that's volume ventilation, and then we learned about pressure ventilation, okay? So, what is the trigger, what is the limit, and what is the cycle for pressure ventilation?
Patient and time is the trigger.
Patient and time is the trigger.
Limit. Oh, cycle by flow.
Cycle by
Time.
time.
Oh, yeah.
Flow is only
Flow is
pressure
only-
support, okay? Cycle by time,
Mhm.
right? And what's your limit in pressure control ventilation?
Pressure.
Set the pressure limit. Can't go above the pressure limit that you set. That's right. Yes.
So, we had a patient on Monday. She was on pressure control.
She was in pressure control mode.
We just put her on the intubator.
Uh-huh.
And then we set the pressure to be downstairs. And when it was
You
good,
set, so this, she's just getting intubated. And you're setting her pressure control. And you set it up to be 37 meters of pressure. What kind of television?
she was actually fighting with us. Yeah, she was fighting with us.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to push both.
Because we don't normally set a patient up on pressure control.
No, we
at
started
30.
with the volume.
That's what I needed to know.
We started with the volume, but
So
she
you
was
started with
still
the volume, and how did you turn volume into pressure? What number did you look at?
the plateau pressure.
That's exactly right. That's how you start at pressure control.
But she
You
was
have to do it
still,
with the plateau pressure.
she was still fighting the wind.
Because the plateau pressure is the least amount of pressure it takes to give that volume.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's what the mode we're going to talk about today. That's how it does it. Okay, so pressure ventilation does have advantages because it can give a lesser amount of pressure than in volume ventilation.
Yeah, and we need the threshold rules way above territory. I think it was at the point it was 40.
46.
Because she was fighting.
Yeah.
Why don't we set pressure? There's no way the patient can like maybe go out of 40%.
But you have to set a pressure limit. Because what if they cough? They're going to create a higher pressure. That's why you set a pressure limit even in pressure control ventilation. You set your pressure limit, and it won't go above that limit, whatever you set. So if they cough, it cuts it off, and it won't deliver any more pressure. It's a safety backup mechanism because we don't want to be delivering 100 centimeters of pressure. You're going to blow the lungs. So you have to always set a pressure limit above. So she was going higher than that 30 centimeters of pressure because she was fighting. So how did they take care of that? Did they sedated her? And did that help? Were you able to ventilate her after that?
Oh, actually, we left.
Okay. Because you can't ventilate somebody who's fighting. You know, that's,
No,
that's the problem.
there are so many.
We need to have a controlled situation. You can't ventilate anybody who's fighting.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's volume, and in pressure ventilation, what types of pressure ventilation do we have? In pressure ventilation, okay. Pressure ventilation has
pressure
different
volume.
characteristics than volume ventilation, does it not?
Yeah.
It does. It has different characteristics. What are the characteristics in pressure ventilation that are different from volume ventilation? And when I say that, I'm talking about waveforms. You have a decelerating flow, which is what? It's more normal. It's a true form of decelerating flow. It's not mathematically calculated. How is the flow decelerated upon what? What does it look like? Look at. It looks at compliance and resistance. That's how it reacts to compliance and resistance. Okay, in volume ventilation, it's mathematically calculated. It doesn't look at lung characteristics. Okay? So, with pressure control, what type of pressure pattern do you have? You have square wave. What does that mean to you?
This pressure is
Okay,
constant.
so because the pressure is constant, and you have a square wave pressure pattern, you have an improved oxygenation because you're holding that pressure throughout the entire breath. So your oxygen, you can actually have better oxygenation, more recruitment. That's one advantage to pressure control ventilation, is that you can hold that pressure constant throughout your inspiratory cycle. Okay, so that's an advantage. and that creates a decelerating flow pattern. So when we say the patient is on a pressure type breath, there are different characteristics than a volume type breath. Okay? Even though they're doing similar, they're given differently. All right? So we have pressure control AC, pressure control SI and V. Right? What is the disadvantage to pressure control?
It's
The
very.
volume is variable. So do you think you could have a patient in pressure control, say, on the floors and not being monitored? No, you couldn't. Because if their compliance goes down, what happens to their tidal volume?
It goes down.
If their area resistance goes up, what happens to their tidal volume?
Decrease.
It decreases. So someone that's on pressure control, they have to be monitored much closer, okay, because of the varying tidal volume. And it will change according to their lung characteristics. So that's the disadvantage to having pressure control, okay? Flow. How is flow delivered? Is it a constant flow in pressure control?
No.
It's a variable or auto flow. But what does auto flow mean to you?
More flow. You can measure.
So don't you think they'd be more comfortable in a fixed flow?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if a patient wants more flow, because I just took a sigh. I needed more flow to take that sigh. We all breathe differently, breath to breath. So if a patient wanted more flow, they can't, they're fixed. And that would make me anxious if I wanted more flow and I couldn't get it. So volume ventilation is a good mode to use if you need a set minute ventilation and you're trying to ventilate them, period. And they're not hard to ventilate patients. Pressure control with that square wave pressure pattern, you're holding that pressure longer. So when you're holding that pressure steady, that pressure is being sent throughout the smaller airways. More time for recruit. You have not more time, but you have better recruitment because you're holding that pressure at a constant level. Okay? So you can have improved oxygenation just because of that reason. All right? And then we can manipulate the eye time, right? Which we can't do on all these ventilators in volume ventilation. What's the only vent we can manipulate eye time? The servo and the new Draeger, you can manipulate both. So that's another thing. If you want to improve oxygenation, how do we improve oxygenation? Okay, FiO2 is one way. What's the other way? Your mean airway pressure. Okay? And what's the number one thing that affects mean airway pressure? Peak. Peak does. But we can also change eye time. If we recruit more alveoli, hold that eye time. We have to watch out for air trapping, but you can hold that eye time. So that's another advantage to pressure control ventilation. You can maneuver your eye time. Okay? So those are the advantages. When a resident asks you, what's the difference between volume and pressure ventilation? Why do you pick pressure ventilation? You can give them those answers. Okay? All right, so the next one we're going to look at here is volume targeted pressure. And what's the name of this mode right here? This control variable. I have to use the new terminology. The control variable. What are we talking about today? PRVC. What does that stand for? Has anybody seen the PowerPoint for today? No. You have? You looked at it? Okay. So pressure regulated volume control. So PRVC, it takes the best of both modes. Okay, it only came out a few years ago. It takes the best of both modes. The best of volume ventilation and the best of pressure ventilation. Because it's a pressure delivered breath. It has the characteristics of pressure ventilation. It is pressure ventilation. But it takes the volume ventilation and it targets a volume delivering the breath as a pressure breath. So now we do have a constant volume. Okay? Because if you pick a targeted volume to deliver the breath. So it's the best of both worlds. They've kind of put both of these modes together into PRVC. So PRVC works. I'm going to show you on the ventilator here in a minute. but it's going to, you're going to set a targeted tidal volume, right? So let's say we pick 500 milliliters after we've calculated their ideal body weight. We set the targeted tidal volume, and then the pressure is going to fluctuate to meet that targeted tidal volume. No matter what the air resistance is, no matter what the compliance is, it's going to adjust itself to meet that targeted tidal volume. So that's an advantage right there. You're always going to give that set tidal volume, so you can give a set minute ventilation when you're trying to ventilate somebody. That's an advantage there. Plus, it has auto flow, so they can take whatever flow they want. Right? You can adjust the eye time. So it's all the characteristics of pressure ventilation, but now we're targeting a volume. All right? So, last week when I was driving home from Myrtle Beach, I was coming off of 95, getting onto 301. Does anybody know that area down in there where there's like these big hills?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I call it the mountains, but it's not really mountains. It's just big hills, right? And you have to do 55 miles per hour, or you get a ticket. And I mean, you will get a ticket. Because there's police everywhere on those back roads going up and down. It's really, I think, 207, and then it turns into 301. So, I have a hard time staying at 55 miles per hour because I'm like a speed demon. And so I said, you know what? Let me just put this in cruise control. And let me just target it 55 miles per hour in cruise control, right? Well, I probably target it like 67 or something like that. But anyway, so, or no, 55, I probably target it like 64, right? It's right under 10. So I put it in cruise control, and I'm driving, and I'm going up and down the mountains. That's what I call them. I'm going up and down the mountains. Little hills, but they look like mountains to me. So I'm going up and down, and all of a sudden I'm going down the hill, and cruise control set for 55 miles per hour. And all of a sudden, the decelerator comes off, right? To bring me back to 55 because I'm going downhill. So it has to back off of that gas. Then I'm going up the hill, and now I've got a lot of resistance trying to get up the hill. So now my gas goes up to reach that 55 miles per hour. And I said, damn. I said, this is PRVC. And my husband said, you know what, enough of your ventilation. I'm done with it. So really, PRVC is the cruise control mode of ventilation. That's what I came up with while driving home from. See, I think ventilation 24/7 too. Not only you guys. But it's true because I targeted whatever I targeted, 60 miles per hour I targeted, let's say. It's going to fluctuate that speed, whether it goes down or it goes up, to maintain that 55 miles per hour. Because that 55 miles per hour is going to stay there. It's not changing. So it's the same thing on your ventilator mode. If you set your volume at 500, that pressure is going to adjust breath by breath to give that 500 tidal volume. All right? Because it's going to maintain it no matter what. If your resistance goes up and it takes more pressure, it's going to take more pressure because if your volume starts to drop, it sees that your volume dropped, and the next breath it'll give more pressure. So that's how PRVC works. It's the cruise control mode of ventilation. And it is a good mode, but it has its disadvantages too. They all have their advantages and their disadvantages. So PRVC is a mode that we start using at PG Hospital. On our protocol, that's the first mode we start using, is PRVC. I think North Arundel does, and I think maybe University of Maryland. So that's our policy. The intensivists, pulmonologists all came together, the therapists, and they decided we're going to start with PRVC. Okay? So that's how PRVC works. Let me show you guys. Let me show you guys on. Okay, so the Draeger is the only machine that we have that can be connected to this screen here. The servo is much easier to see PRVC, and you guys will see it in lab today on how it works. We'll do a lab with PRVC. But the Draeger is the only one that we can use. So, PRVC has different names on different machines, of course, right? They all have different names. So the Vela and the Servo are called PRVC. The Draeger is called, let me get rid of this. See, this is our new machine here. Who's worked with this Draeger? Anybody? With Sam? I had it this morning. Let's see. Start, new adult.
The start.
New adult.
And
What did you say, Chrissy?
the start and the start.
Oh, there you go. I didn't get it. Okay, because I already set it up this morning. Okay, so see how we have VCAC, volume AC? Okay, so in this, on this Draeger, on this machine, it's going to be VCAC and autoflow. Let me try to put it back. All right, so here's VCAC. You have to hit additional settings. See it right here? This is how you get into it with this machine. So your VCAC, I have it in autoflow right now, but I'm going to take it off. So VCAC autoflow is PRVC. It's targeting the volume, but we're using autoflow, so it's giving, it's delivering as a pressure breath. Okay. So you hit additional settings here, and then here, what's the autoflow? See that? Autoflow, you turn it on or off, and you always have to hit accept. So I just turned it off. Do you see how this, watch this next breath. Now we have a volume breath, okay? And here's the pressure breath. All right, so when you're starting it up for PRVC, the way it works, and I'll go over this with the PowerPoint, but the way it works is it delivers a test breath. The first breath is a test breath in PRVC. And it doesn't really show it up nicely here. It does on the other vents. But this one, it doesn't show it up nicely. So what it does is it gives a volume breath the first breath. And when it gives that volume breath, it holds, it gives an inspiratory hold to look at the plateau pressure. The machine looks at the plateau pressure. It takes that plateau pressure, all right? That's the minimum amount of pressure to deliver that certain tidal volume that you have plugged in. And then the next breath, it targets that volume with that pressure, okay? So let's say it didn't totally reach that volume. By the third breath, it has picked up, or whatever it needed to adjust its pressure to deliver that volume. So it's like a test of 3 breaths. So the first breath, it's a volume breath, and it does an inspiratory hold, and it looks at the plateau pressure. The second breath, it tries to deliver that targeted volume at that plateau pressure. So there's an advantage right there. It's taking the minimal amount of pressure to deliver that volume. That's an advantage for pressure ventilation, period. The minimal amount of pressure to deliver a volume in the lungs. Okay, so we still have a square wave pressure pattern, right? We still have a decelerating flow. It is, how is this cycled? Time cycled. So it's just like pressure control. It has just a few different variances. Okay? So when you're starting this, so we're going to start it. We're going to turn this autoflow on. Now watch this first breath. See, here you don't really see a plateau breath, but now it does the pressure breath. On the other machines, you actually see it held, and you see the plateau, and then the next breath it does the pressure breath. Okay? So it's going to adjust. Okay, so let's see. Right now I have, let me turn this on. I have volume of, so my volume here is 450. My eye time, I can set my eye time at whatever I want my eye time to be. My respiratory is set at 12, my PEEP set at 5, and I'm not worrying about the slope right now. The slope's off. Okay, so if I want to start breathing, if I want more flow, Okay? Can I pull out more flow?
Yes.
Yes, I can. I can pull out more flow. All right? The problem is with this machine, if you pull out more flow, so let's see what happens. We're targeting 450, and it's giving me a pressure of 23 centimeters to do this. All right? So if I want more flow, because I'm getting anxious. See how my volume goes up?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen to my pressure now? It's going to decrease. Because it wants to target that volume, right? It's going to target 450 no matter what. So if I'm pulling more flow, do you see my pressure dropping? My pressure keeps dropping. What happens when your pressure drops to the flow?
Hmm?
When your pressure drops, what happens to your flow?
Increase.
No.
No, it's decrease.
It decreases in pressure ventilation, right? With pressure is flow. So if my pressure is dropping and I'm working harder to breathe, okay, and I want more flow because I'm pulling, I want more flow, okay? In PRVC, it sees a higher tidal volume. And what happens with the next breath? It drops its pressure because it has to meet that tidal volume, correct? So, it drops with dropping its pressure, it's also going to decrease the flow because it's less pressure. So now the patient's saying, I'm really air hungry, I want more flow. So we're pulling it out even more. And we're dropping the pressure even more because it sees a higher tidal volume. So it becomes a vicious cycle. Okay? So as the patient's demanding more flow, with more flow gives it a larger tidal volume, right? You just saw that. With more flow gives a larger tidal volume, my pressure starts dropping. It says, oh, I'm giving 550 tidal volume, I need to drop that pressure. So it's just dropped the pressure and it just dropped the flow. And now my patient's air hungry even more. So every breath, it can keep doing that until it can get down to CPAP actually, your pressure. So this is a disadvantage for PRVC. So if somebody is working and you come in and you're taking a report and the therapist says, everything looks good, my peak pressures are low. They're like 15. They're nothing. They're really low. Patients' volumes, we're maintaining their volume. Stats are good. But and now you need to do a weaning trial. You need to put them on a spontaneous weaning trial, right? They've been doing this all night long, pulling and working, and the ventilator's decreasing the pressure and the patient's working more, okay? So by the time you come in and you have to do a spontaneous weaning trial, do you think they're going to pass that spontaneous weaning trial? No. They've been working all night long. All right, so that's a disadvantage to PRVC. It's a good mode to use, but you have to know how to use it. So if your patient starts to get anxious or increases work of breathing, you need to get them out of that mode. All right, you need to change to another mode. All right, so let's see where we're at here. So remember this, the test breath, it calculates the compliance of the patient. And that's how it determines where the ventilator is going to start delivering that pressure. Okay? This is also important. So we have all those characteristics. We have time and patient triggered, right? It's cycled by time. The pressure limit is the limit, okay? So it cannot go. Maximum pressure level is 5 centimeters below the preset upper pressure limit. This is important to understand. The machine will deliver the pressure. So let's say our plateau pressure is 30, right? Because that's the pressure we're delivering. That's your plateau pressure, okay? And We don't want to go above 30. Okay? So we need to set our upper pressure limit no higher than 35 to 40 centimeters of pressure, because it will go up to 5 below the upper pressure limit set. So if we have it set at 40, that pressure will go up to 35. All right? So you cannot set your pressure limits high, because we don't want our plateau pressures going up above 30. So the rule is that you can set your upper pressure limit, all right, your peak pressure limit, between 35 and 40, no higher. Because you don't want the machine to be delivering 40 centimeters of pressure, and that's your plateau pressure, and cause barotrauma. So that's our safety mechanism. So the machine will give a breath, will give pressure up until 5 centimeters to the upper pressure limit. All right? This machine over here will give it up to 3 centimeters below the upper pressure limit. Well, all the others are 5. So what will happen if you reach that pressure and you haven't delivered that tidal volume? It'll say volume not met, volume not reached. That means you've gone above. You have to figure out why your pressure is going so high. Okay? So you will not get your full volume because it's a pressure limit. Okay, this is what we just went over. So somebody explain to me how the ventilator, see here, this is a much prettier picture. Okay, it's a volume breath, right? It's got the plateau pressure. It's got an inspiratory pulse, reading the plateau pressure. And then it takes the next breath and says, okay, I'm going to deliver that breath at that plateau pressure, targeting my tidal volume here of 400 milliliters. And then the next breath, if my volume came back at 375, it increases it to reach that 400. So this is a smart mode. This is a smart mode of ventilation. We have other smart modes that you'll learn about later, but a smart mode means that the ventilator is looking at the lung characteristics of the patient and changes that breath by breath. It changes the pressure. Where other modes, you set the pressure and you set the volume and it doesn't change. So they're not smart modes. This is a smart mode. It can adjust itself according to the compliance and resistance of the patient to reach that targeted tidal volume. Okay? So it's called a smart mode. All right, so that's how it does. First breath, second breath, and third breath. So now it's going to adjust. So the very first test breath is only looking at the compliance of the lung. But all of the other breaths changes according to the resistance and the compliance of the lung. So as resistance increases, what happens to your pressure?
Goes up.
Goes up. As compliance decreases, what happens to your pressure?
Goes up.
As compliance decreases,
Pressure decreases.
pressure's going to have to go up.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
I thought you said no. Yeah,
I said
pressure's-
goes up.
Okay, sorry. Pressure's got to go up. These are the names. So the Servo I and the Vela, PRVC. Drager that we have right here, CMV with autoflow. These are all different names from different. The PB840, which is that one, VC plus. All right? So we said that this mode is the cruise control mode of ventilation, right? And if you think about setting that targeted speed at 55, and the pressure has to go up and down when you're going up those hills and down those hills, you remember PRVC, how it works. So you can see here, as pressure increases, flow increases. Pressure and flow are directly related in pressure ventilation. If you have an increased pressure, you're going to have increased flow. All right, so if the patient is air hungry, we can do different things to help them with their air hunger. We can actually increase their tidal volume, which is going to have to give more pressure and more flow, right? Okay, so we already said it's time cycle. Okay, so this is talking here about time constants. What does time constants mean to you guys with alveolar filling?
By that time, yeah, alveolar gonna fill.
The time it takes to fill the alveoli, right? Okay, so if a patient has, let's look at this one here. So if a patient is not reaching the baseline, what does that mean for pressure equalizing? Has the pressure equalized in the alveoli? No, it has not equalized in the alveoli. So we have not filled the alveoli fully. Okay, so you still have time. You can increase your time to have equalized pressure in the alveoli and in the from the alveoli to the mouth, right? Okay, so in pressure control ventilation, if you increase your I time, do you increase your volume delivered to the patient?
Yeah.
Yes, because you reach alveolar filling once you reach baseline. So you would increase your tidal volume delivered to the patient.
Yeah.
In pressure control ventilation, you increase that I time to reach baseline, and you'll give a larger volume, right? Now, in pressure PRVC, okay, if you do not reach baseline, and you try to lengthen your I time to give a larger volume, right? What's going to happen to the pressure if I give a higher volume than what's set? It's going to decrease. It's going to decrease. So it doesn't work the same in PRVC as it does in pressure control ventilation. It will decrease. If you try to lengthen your I time to get a larger volume, it will decrease that pressure. Because if let's say you're trying to increase your mean airway pressure by giving a larger tidal volume, right? You want to increase your mean airway pressure. Well, it's not going to work because the total pressure system is going to decrease. Okay, because it has to maintain that 500 tidal volume throughout the entire time. All right. So when it's changing breath to breath, it can change up to 3 centimeters of pressure per breath. That's the max that it will change for breath to breath. 1 to 3 centimeters of pressure it will change as it needs to adjust. Okay, so we said here, this is important here, the upper pressure limit cannot go higher than 35 to 40 centimeters of pressure. Why did we set it like that? So your plateau pressure doesn't go any higher. That's right. So we set it like this. Okay, so the patient here, it's patient or time triggered. Why is it pressure and volume limited? What does that mean? Pressure and volume limited. Because you set both. You're targeting both. So you set, right? You're setting your volume, but you also set a pressure limit. If it reaches that pressure limit, 5 centimeters below that pressure limit, it will not give the full volume. So it's both. It's pressure and volume limited and time cycle. All right, so we have PRVC AC, and actually it's supposed to be volume. Actually, it should be PRVC AC. That's correct terminology. PRVC AC and PRVC SIMB. So all these modes have both AC and SIMB. Okay, so you can deliver in either one. All right. So, advantages. We talked about some of the advantages of PRVC. What's one advantage I told you guys about? Okay, it's a constant ventilation because you have a set tidal volume. So you do have a constant. So that's the benefit from volume ventilation, is the constant ventilation. What else? So that's one advantage from volume ventilation. What's another advantage?
Flow is variable.
Flow is variable, so the patient can pull more flow if they want it. Okay, so that's an advantage.
That helps with patient comfort and breathing.
Exactly. It does help with patient. What's another advantage? What's the characteristics of pressure ventilation? Constant pressure, which does what? Improves oxygenation. That's correct. So that's another advantage. Constant pressure. So it's taking the advantages of both styles of ventilating into one mode. Okay? So it's a good mode to use. It's a smart mode. It adjusts it breath by breath for the patient's being comfortable, right? Okay, so those, any other advantages that I missed? Safe limits, variable flow, we talked about all that. See, improves gas distribution. The constant pressure improves gas distribution, which improves oxygenation. All right, so those are all the advantages. So what are the disadvantages? You know, some therapists don't even realize this, and I know the doctors don't know this. I have one intensivist that he only wants PRVC. He doesn't care what it means. He doesn't care what's going on with the patient. He wants that person in PRVC, and that's it. He's our new intensivist. So when I get a hold of him, I'm going to explain to him what the disadvantage is to PRVC if you have a patient that's not tolerating PRVC. Because it is a good mode to use. It doesn't mean you should never use it. You just need to know when you should not use it anymore. Okay? So what's the major disadvantage? Yes.
It's
It drops the patient's working, it drops the pressures.
She said what? I can't hear you.
That if your patient wants more flow, it will drop your pressures to meet that tidal volume, so they'll remain air hungry.
So as the patient works, as the patient's work of breathing increases, the machine does not know that it's the patient. They just see that they're getting a higher tidal volume. If I take a deep breath in and I pull more flow, it's going to give me a larger tidal volume. So now I'm pulling 700 milliliters out, okay, for that breath. The machine, the next breath, is going to drop the pressure. When you drop the pressure, it drops the flow. So now I'm even more air hungry. My next breath, I pull again to 700 milliliters. It sees that. It drops the pressure, drops the flow. Patient's more air hungry. It's a vicious cycle. It continues to do it until you correct it. Okay? So you have to watch somebody that is starting to have an increased work of breathing in this mode. Do you not like this mode, Adi?
So I don't understand that part. When you tidal increase, pressure should
It does. It does. It actually does. That's what I said in the beginning. So as the volume increases, the pressure increases with that breath. The pressure and flow increase with that breath, right? So my pressure does go up initially, but then my next breath, it says, oh, my volume's 700 milliliters. My pressure did go up for that breath, but it says, oh, I'm 700 milliliters. I'm going to drop down. So let's say it took 25 centimeters originally to give a 500 tidal volume, and I pulled in 700, and my pressure went up to, let's say it went up to 28 to give that 700. The next breath, it says, I have to drop my pressure, because my regular pressure was 25. I have to drop that pressure to get back to 500. So now I'm at 23. Okay? And then I pull again. Pull up to 700. Get the flow. The next breath, it says, oh, I got to drop it even more. So it goes down to 22. And then it goes to 21. So each breath that they pull, it does pull in that extra flow, but it keeps dropping it. It will drop that pressure all the way down to CPAP. So that 100% work of breathing is on the patient. Because that patient's now pulling. Instead of the flow being pushed out to the patient with the pressure, instead of it being pushed out, the patient is now pulling it out. And that's the work of breathing on the patient. They're pulling out that flow as opposed to the ventilator pushing out that flow. Okay? So that's the difference on this with PRVs. Does that make more sense? All right, so these are the disadvantages. Upper pressure limit. If I come in and see you guys in clinical and you've got your PRVC, you better have your pressure limit set correctly because you can't go higher than this. 35 to 40 is what I want to see it, no higher. Because that's our safety, that's our backup safety net. We don't want the plateau pressure going higher, okay? See where it says here? Pressure can go essentially go all the way down to CPAP. So the therapist could say to you, like I said earlier, the therapist can say, my pressures are really low, must have really good compliance because my pressures are 9, right? They're ventilating with 9. My volumes are good, SATs are good, but their work of breathing has tripled because now they're pulling from the machine. The machine's not delivering the pressure and working for the patient. so inspiratory desynchrony. So you guys learned all desynchrony the last couple weeks. So you guys should be good at desynchrony. All right, you're going to hear all this desynchrony again. Eric Kreiner teaches this at the conference, and he goes over all desynchrony. And it'll be the same thing that we're teaching here. Because a lot of the therapists don't know desynchrony because they haven't really learned graphics. Because this is more in the last few years that it's newer. Okay, so Eric Kreiner tries to educate, all the therapists at the conference. So inspiratory desynchrony. If we're not getting the flow, it's not enough flow, the pressure's going to drop. Okay, so we have to be able to recognize inadequate flow or pressure. All right. So, you guys know this now. In a pressure-delivered breath, we know our waveform is humped, and that means they're pulling flow out of the machine, right? And it actually humps that waveform. So you can see if the patient's work of breathing has increased, right? All of this Nina said, is the increased work of breathing. That's the work of the patient. So you can visualize on your graphics if your patient's working and their pressures are dropping, which means their flows are dropping, and they're pulling flow out of the ventilator. Okay? We have to recognize that. We have to fix that with the patient. Here's the Draeger. Okay? So with the Draeger here, let's see, we have a tidal volume of 700. Look at our peak pressure. You see that, Heidi? It dropped all the way to 9 because it's got to maintain whatever volume was set here. I don't know. Let me see. Here's our volume. So let's say it's set at 500. All right, it's set at 500. They're pulling more flow out of the machine, and that pressure's dropping it because it's reading a high volume. So it keeps decreasing the pressure. Keeps decreasing the pressure. Yes.
So would you decrease your eye time at birth?
For your eye time, if you actually increase your eye time, yeah. So here, let me show you. Here's your options. Decreasing eye time, right? Will decrease the tidal volume, and actually, it'll trick the machine into trying to give a larger breath. So that's an option. Does it work? No. But that's an option that you have. It normally doesn't work. But if you do try to trick the machine because it sees that it's dropped and then it'll give more pressure, that's an option. That's one option that we can do. But it normally does not work. So when you shorten that eye time and you have 390, the next breath is going to give more pressure, more flow for the patient, right? Very good. That's the second option. Are we there at the second option yet? Okay, so we decrease the eye time to trick the machine, and you see the next breath, there's more flow to reach that tidal volume. Okay, so that's the first one. If you try to decrease the tidal volume or decrease the eye time, it drops the tidal volume, the machine picks up the pressure. All right? So that's the first one. Second one is going to be to increase the tidal volume, like you said. If you increase the tidal volume, it has to increase that pressure and that flow. Okay? That rarely works. So those are your first two options. First one is to decrease eye time. Second one is to increase your tidal volume. Right? Those rarely work. So if your patient is really working on PRVC, the safest thing to do is to get your patient out of that mode. All right? You need more support. That patient needs more support. Just get them out of the mode. Change the mode. All right? If you change them to P pressure AC, they're going to get a constant pressure and a constant flow. It's not going to fluctuate breath by breath. All right? So it is a good mode, but when they are having trouble and they're working harder, get them out of that mode and either put them in PAC, pressure AC, or volume AC. All right, and then you can give them a higher flow rate if they want a higher flow rate. All right, so those are your three options. So the first one is to do what? Decrease the eye time, and that pulls the machine, right, to try trying to get more pressure because the volume drops. What's your second one? Increase the tidal volume. And the third one?
To change the mode.
Change the mode. So that's how we fix that problem. And you will see it in clinical. You will see this problem. And you can try the first two options just to see if it works, but you're probably going to end up going to a different mode. I can't hear you. What? No, if you decrease the eye time, your volume, you won't be able to deliver that full volume. It'll cut your volume back. Okay, so that breath, it cuts your volume back from 500 to 350. So the next breath has to pick up pressure to get you back to 500. Say that again? Well, it's only one breath. It's only going to be one breath. If you decrease your eye time, it'll be the one breath. It'll see the 350, let's say, because it's going to drop your volume. The next breath, it picks up that pressure to get you back to 550 or 500, whatever you set it on. Okay? So it's only for one breath that it's doing that. So cycle to synchrony. It's the same thing that you guys have already learned in pressure ventilation. No different for cycle to synchrony. Inspiratory flow looks the same, right? If you have inadequate flow, that looks the same on your flow pattern. And cycle to synchrony is the same as what Nina talked about in pressure control. We call this double triggering, and how do we fix this?
Give them more
The
time.
patient's neural time is longer than the ventilator set time for the eye time, right? So how do we fix this?
Increase the time.
You increase the eye time, so it's a longer time for the patient. This one's the easiest one to see, cycle to synchrony. And you'll see it when you go into the patient's room. You see that right away. And you know you need to increase your eye time. It's not long enough for the patient. So that's a really easy one to see. And then moderate to synchrony, they're trying to trigger, right? But it's not enough to give them another breath, so they don't. And then you've got your mild to synchrony. All right? So those are the three ways. You guys comfortable with seeing cycle to synchrony? In cycle to synchrony, for like moderate, you can see here that the patient's trying to trigger another breath because they weren't ready to exhale. The machine cycled into exhalation. The inspiratory valve closed. The expiratory valve opens, and the machine's trying to exhale for them. But they're not ready. They weren't ready to exhale, so they attempt to take another breath in. But in moderate, it's not enough to deliver another breath. Okay, and in mild, it doesn't really show much here. But they're trying to trigger another breath. So I see if the patient is wanting to, this is the easiest here to recognize. If the patient's wanting to continue that breath, they're breathing in, the machine all of a sudden closes the inspiratory valve and opens the expiratory valve, right? And starts exhalation, but they want another breath. They're not done breathing in, all right? And they pull in. If they pull in hard enough, it's going to trigger another breath. It's going to trigger the inspiratory valve to open and the expiratory valve to close. Okay, so if you think about the valves, it opens the inspiratory valve because they pulled hard enough to open the inspiratory valve and close the expiratory valve. And here, you have a double trigger, so you would have a larger volume in the end. You'd have like a double volume, okay? And that's not safe for the patient either. So you want to lengthen your eye time. And this here is the ventilator's eye time, and here's the patient's eye time. They just want a longer eye time, so that's how you would do it. You would increase it to match the patient's eye time. And we know if it's for cycle to synchrony, if you have a hump here, all right, patient's trying to exhale against incoming volume. How do we fix that? Decrease the eye time. And what does the patient look like?
Oh, working.
They're pushing.
Pushing the abdominal.
You're going to see abdominal muscles pushing that air out against that pressure. Okay? So you'll see a little hump at the end of the inspiratory, at the end of the breath. You'll see that little hump. And they're trying to exhale, but the machine's not ready for them to exhale. The inspiratory valve's still open. So they're pushing against that flow coming at them. All right, that tells us, okay, the patient wants to exhale. We need to decrease that I time. And that's how we correct it. Expiratory synchrony, you guys know pretty well, I think. Right? We talked a lot about expiratory synchrony. Okay, so it looks exactly the same as in pressure control. So when we're trying to correct auto peak, the intrinsic things that causes auto peak are airway resistance, secretions, bronchospasm, all of those cause intrinsic auto peak. And what are the things we can do to correct it? Extrinsic auto peak?
That's not what we said, right?
I said intrinsic. Extrinsic. Decrease the
because
eye
of
time,
that,
decrease
because of
respiratory rate, so that we're not causing air trapping, right? Okay, so, what do you think of PRVC? You think you'd want to use that mode?
Yeah.
No.
No, you guys didn't like PRVC? You like it?
I do.
Yeah, so it's a good mode. It's a smart mode. You just have to pay attention to your patient.
But it's not smart enough to know the patient needs.
It is not smart enough to know that the patient's doing the work of breathing and not the machine. So it's not that smart.
No.
But it is a smart mode, and it will adjust according to the compliance and the resistance. In pressure control, it doesn't adjust to the patient's compliance and resistance, right? The volumes just start dropping. So you have to watch your patient there too.
So I think they need to advance their mode. The machine will be able to recognize, okay, you know what, now my patient needs more flow. I need to do something positive as opposed to drop pressure. So they need to come up with those scientists need to come up with some. So
They have some
need
other
to
modes,
advance.
some other smart modes that we'll talk about at the end. So they are coming up with, I mean, they've come up with so many new modes, you know, for ventilating compared to when I first started. There's a lot of different modes.
Also, I think they need to come up with only one mode that's gonna control everything. You know.
Yeah, but not everybody's the same.
Yeah, the machine.
You're
will be
saying the
able-
machine would
the-
vary
yeah.
towards the patient.
Right.
Like a robot.
Well, if you did that, you'll be rich.
Like a robot.
I'll tell you that.
Exactly.
I'll tell you that right now. If you do that, you'll be rich, Dada.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk after class and figure out how to do that.
Okay.
So we can become rich.
That's right.
Okay. All right. So PRVC is a good mode. You just have, and I really want to go and educate this physician, this particular physician, about PRVC because it is a good mode. So I'm not telling them not to use it. It's a good mode to use. But when the patient starts working, you need to recognize to get the patient out of that mode. Change the mode if they have an increased work of breathing because the machine's not going to do it for them. It doesn't know that the patient's working. It's just going to deliver that 500 no matter what.
But you
No
know
matter what.
What if you set up the other mode, PRVC with the SMV?
SMV.
Is that gonna eliminate the disadvantage?
No, so if you have PRVC, which we have AC, and SIMV, okay, the SIMV is just going to be augmented with pressure support. Okay? But it'll be the same thing for the mandatory breath. Will be a low pressure if the patient is increasing work of breathing. The machine starts to decrease the work of breathing from the machine. So it would be the same, even in PRVC, SIMV. Yes. Volume support ventilation. Volume support, don't give me that look, Ozzy. Volume support ventilation is the same thing as pressure support ventilation. Just keep it simple. It's the same thing as pressure support ventilation, although we're targeting a volume. Okay, does that make sense? So it's just like PRVC, but in the spontaneous mode. Alright, same thing. It's like PRVC in the spontaneous mode. Volume ventilation. I don't know if hospital center uses it. We used it for a short time, but we don't utilize it a lot anymore. And I don't think hospital center does either. but you need to understand the mode. So, it's a spontaneous. Patient has to spontaneously breathe in order to be in the spontaneous, in this volume support ventilation. And we call it volume targeted. The control variable is volume targeted inspiratory pressure. Just like PRVC, we're targeting a volume and fluctuating the pressure. So you have a set volume for the patient's spontaneous breath. So to say the patient's spontaneously breathing, we've weaned them down and they're spontaneously breathing, but we want to make sure that they get a set pressure. A set volume with every breath. All right? Maybe they've been kind of marginal, or they've been given, I shouldn't say sedation, but they've been given some sedation and their breaths are more shallow. Okay? We want a set volume with their pressure, with their spontaneous breaths. That's why you would use it. If you're a little hesitant about your patient being in the spontaneous mode and you want to make sure they get a certain minute ventilation, put them in volume support. Because they will get a certain minute ventilation, right? As long as the patient breathes, the patient has to breathe, but they'll get that volume, whatever you set it at, every time. Okay? Okay, so it's just like PRVC. The pressure is adjusted 1 to 3 centimeters for every breath. All right, adjust it up or adjust it down to target that volume. So you can see here now. Remember now, the patient has to be spontaneously breathing in order for the machine to give the support. This is spontaneous mode. So it's going to maintain that pressure to maintain that certain tidal volume, okay? And like it says here, if your tidal volume is maintained, your pressure is maintained. All right? If your tidal volume starts to drop, the pressure is going to increase. It's just pressure support. Where do we want to see the tidal volume for a spontaneous breath?
Yeah.
Right. So 5 mils per kilo for pressure support, right, for a spontaneous breath. Because we're just augmenting their own breathing to overcome the tubing resistance, right? We want them to breathe on their own. We want them to utilize their own muscles. And we want them to do some work, right, to get stronger so that we can get them off the ventilator. If they don't do any work ever, their muscles are going to become atrophied, and then they're not going to be able to be weaned and be extubated. So this is a mode for when the patient's weaning and we're trying to extubate them. But we want to make sure they have a certain volume so that they get a certain minute ventilation. All right? Because in pressure support, if you deliver a pressure support of 10, your volumes are going to be variable, right? They could be anything. They could be 100. It could be 200. So this just guarantees you that certain tidal volume so you feel a little bit more comfortable about your patient. They're going to get this volume every breath. And we're only going to give them 5 mils per kilo. All right? We're not trying to fully support them. We're just trying to augment their own spontaneous breath. So that's basically how it works. Let's see. If apnea occurs, this is important. If the patient goes apneic, we always have to, in spontaneous modes, you have to have a backup ventilation. So if your patient goes apneic, it goes to PRVC. That's the mode. That's the backup mode it will go to if your patient should go apneic. So the spontaneous mode. So volume support targets the volume. Pressure support is pressure. All right. So they're basically the same thing. Triggers patient for both. Cycle is flow for both. We set a volume here. Okay. So the pressure is variable. Here we set a pressure, so the volume is variable. Right. And we set a pressure limit. Okay. That doesn't seem. That's pretty easy.
So which one is better? Is the volume support or pressure?
Well, if your patient is comfortable and they're awake and you're not worried about them having small volumes, because you're always going to set a low minute ventilation anyway alarm, right? Mm-hmm. So that's always your backup, whether you're in pressure support or volume support. You always set that low minute volume alarm. What's the lowest we can set a low minute volume alarm to? 4 liters per minute. Mm-hmm. So if they go below that in either mode, All right, because maybe the patient slowed down the breathing in the volume mode. Maybe they went down to 5 breaths a minute, and your minute ventilation is going to drop. So you just want to, you want to make sure. What was your question?
No, my question was which one is better?
So there
The volume
really
support or
really is
pressure
no. I mean, there's really not. It's your preference on your patient. If you're worried about your patient not taking large enough volumes, then you would go to volume support. We used it for a very short time, and then we just stopped using it. Because pressure support works just as well. But this is just targeting your volume.
Because I'm saying that could be put in the position and ask you, so you want to put in the volume support or pressure support and why?
They won't even know volume support. So they're not going to ask you that. But you need to know what the volume support mode is. Yes.
And I think on the pressure support, how we set up
Because it's going to maintain that certain volume, no matter what. So it'll increase the pressure. So the patient doesn't have to work as hard on that one, right? Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, we used it for a short time. I don't even know if hospital center uses this. I don't think they do. But you're right. If you're maintaining that certain volume every breath, then the pressure is probably going to be, increasing as the patient's volume is trying to drop, right? So this is probably a little bit more support, but they're both similar. Okay? So one is just targeting a volume, pressure is variable. That's it. They're both spontaneous modes. This one, the pressure is set and the volume is variable. That's it. The synchrony of volume support is going to be the same. You'll see the hump here, right? So you know you need to help this patient because they need more flow. In volume support, how could you do that?
Decrease the time of
In volume support, if they need more flow, we need more pressure, right? So if you increase that total volume, you're going to get more pressure, therefore more flow. So that's how you would correct. That's how you would correct somebody who is flow air hungry and wanting more flow. If you increase that volume, it's going to take more pressure to deliver that volume, right? Chitty said what? Increase IPAP? So you better walk on out of the room right now. Increase IPAP. And pressure support, you have your hump. So this is why we have to look at our waveforms. You got to pay attention to these waveforms when you're in the patient's room. Okay? And you see this hump on the flow waveform. How do you correct it with pressure support? We don't have a targeted tidal volume. We're in pressure support. How do we fix this air hunger right here?
increase pressure.
Increase pressure. You increase pressure, you're going to get more flow. So that's how you're going to correct it.
But your
What's
pressure's already on 30
what's
centimeters
that?
of
Yeah.
water,
So what you gonna?
They're on 30 centimeters of water?
Right.
Not in pressure support, they're not. If you in pressure support, if you were given 30 centimeters of pressure, you better be in a mode, a ventilating mode. We're in pressure support, right? Where do we start our pressure support, Nathan? 10 to 15. 10 to 15 mils. 10 to 15 centimeters of pressure is where we start. Okay? So that's how you would fix it. You would increase your pressure to increase your flow. Okay? And as Nina said, this right here represents the work of breathing of the patient. Okay? So you see why it's so important to know how to read your graphics so that we know how to maintain the patient's comfort. You don't want to work all night long like this. Cycle dysynchrony. Nina talked about this last week. How do we fix cycle dysynchrony with a spontaneous mode? How is pressure support cycled? Flow, and what does it have to reach before it cycles into expiration? What is it? 25% of its total peak flow, right? That's when it cycles into expiration, okay? And if you have cycle dysynchrony and the patient wants to have a longer inspiration, okay, how do you fix it?
Decrease the E.
Your E sensitivity, You would take it from 25% maybe to 15%, okay, for a longer eye time. If you want a shorter eye time, because you have a COPD patient, you want a longer E time, where do you put your E sensitivity to? Maybe 45, 50%, okay? But your volume might be cut. So you have to look at that and make sure you're not depleting them of the volume that they need. Because it might not be enough time to reach that volume. Okay, so that's how we fix the E sensitivities on the ventilators there. Okay, so you guys don't have clickers. There's only 2 questions, so I didn't bring them in. All right, so let's look at the first one. The ventilator mode that delivers pressure breaths that are patient or time triggered, volume targeted, time cycled, and where the pressure is automatically adjusted to maintain delivery of the targeted volume is which of the following? It's the cruise control of ventilation.
C.
Good. Pressure regulated volume control ventilation. So you could have questions like this on an exam. Alright?
The exam look different. Those questions we practice in the exams sound different.
You think they're different? Alright, I'm going to go over a couple questions with you.
Yeah,
That you might
because-
see. Okay? I'm going to do that for you guys. Ventilator mode where every breath is patient triggered. Every breath is patient triggered. Pressure targeted. Flow cycled with a volume target is which of the following? Gotta be. It's the one I just went over, right? It's the 2 modes I just went over. Okay, it's pressure targeted with a volume target. With a volume target. It's going to be volume support ventilation, right? So you learn PRVC, so you guys know the modes now. You know volume ventilation, you know pressure ventilation, you know PRVC, which is the best of both modes, both types of ventilation, right? You know PRVC and you know spontaneous ventilation. So the big one left you guys have is APRV. That's the good mode right there. APRV. So we'll learn that, I think, in next week or so. We'll learn APRV. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, I thought you said on volume support the pressure is gonna...
The pressure is variable, but you can set a pressure limit. That's why it says that. You can set a pressure limit so it won't go above the pressure limit. Just like your peak pressure, we always set a peak pressure limit. Okay, so you can set a pressure limit. But you're targeting a volume. All right?
But then you're not targeting the pressure, you're just targeting...
You're not targeting. That should say limit. Yeah, that should say
Volume
limit.
limit, right?
It's a volume target with a pressure limit.
Okay.
That would make more sense, right?
Yeah.
Radiology's in the house. We're the only ones that are over here. They're like, you guys are in the classroom all day long. You know. Okay, what time is it? I want to go over a couple questions with you. You want to take 5?
Yes, please.
Yeah, current problem is, yeah, 'cause that's, this is worth 3 points. Yeah, go ahead. You should get a blood pressure and a body temperature. No, I want it. What is she talking about? I need a body temperature.
The other one, when you look at the other one, we have here as
What are you doing? Wake
Trying
up?
to wake up.
Sacrifice.
I only had 3 hours of sleep and it's just like, boom.
Doesn't matter, I still need to, I
on
know.
that very day.
Yeah. But I mean, you couldn't get the
I should do,
cover vitals.
On that day, no. I have my own here. I spend everything here. I have a detail. I don't know who the first thing
Blood pressures are documented on the file. She just, they do blood pressure, they do vitals like every couple hours. So cover vitals.
I should bring it so that we check it with my
Yeah, so blood pressures are down here.
you finally got saw in.
Oh yeah. Always get some. What is the walls on?
Yeah, I was listening to, what was I listening to yesterday? I just finished off recording.